From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, I am Estefania Bravo. This is from the South. During a meeting with the leaders of Venezuela's ruling party, President Nicolas Maduro has said the government is continuing conversations with the opposition in Norway.
We are back in Norway because we believe in dialogue, and we are willing to talk about all topics related to our country, to try and find a democratic and constitutional solution to the conflict that has gripped our country, and to look for peace.
President Maduro also said that foreign governments have still not answered for Venezuela's funds frozen in international banks.
More than 88 tons of gold are frozen in London. Gold that belongs to the Central Bank of Venezuela. Worldwide Central Bank holds special immunity within international law, and a nation's belongings are untouchable. It does not matter what currency it is, dollars, euros, gold, central banks are untouchable. We have billions of dollars in private banks. Money which was meant for food and medicine. Let's remember the case of Novo Bank in Portugal, where we had already signed contracts to buy medicine, industrial supplies and food, and then $1.7 billion were frozen, and no one is answering for that.
A fourth plane carrying medical supplies from China has arrived in Venezuela. This is part of the Bolivarian government's cooperation agreement with Beijing. Our correspondent, Leonel Ratamal, is at Maiquetía Airport in Caracas.
We are here at the Caracas airport as workers unload 69 tons of medical supplies and equipment from the People's Republic of China. This is the fourth plane that has arrived as part of a cooperation agreement between the two countries. In all, these flights have brought a total of 269 tons of supplies to restock hospitals across Venezuela. There are medicines here to treat everything from hypertension to diabetes, as well as a large quantity of surgical supplies. This aid seeks to soften the blow dealt to the population by the economic blockade imposed on Venezuela by the United States. Soon after this plane arrived, the Health Minister Carlos Alvarado spoke to the press along with the Chinese ambassador. Alvarado announced that the Bolivarian government also plans to spend over $100 million to make ongoing purchases of medicine from China.
We thank Leonel Retamal for that report, and the Venezuelan Health Minister, along with Chinese Ambassador Li Baorong, have reaffirmed their government's commitment to overcoming the crippling economic blockade.
We are looking into all available methods, be it from China, Cuba, Russia, through international organizations, through the UN, to resolve this situation and overcome the blockade set by the United States, to guarantee our citizens proper access to health care.
This aid showcases our deep friendship with the Venezuelan people. We are convinced this will help the people in the face of this grave situation caused by criminal foreign sanctions.
The foreign ministers of Russia and Cuba have met in Moscow to discuss the U.S. blockade on the island and the political situation in Venezuela. The meeting also focused on commercial and economic agreements. Russia's foreign minister Sergei Lavrov said his country will continue supporting Cuba in its fight against the blockade. His counterpart, Bruno Rodriguez, said Cuba is supporting the talks between the Venezuelan government and opposition that are set to restart in Norway.
Cuba's history has shown that impositions regarding international law have not worked. We, as our Cuban brothers, think that the illegal sanctions on the island are unacceptable, and we reaffirm that we do not support the economic, commercial, and financial blockade pushed by the United States. We will continue supporting the island on their fight to end the blockade. We are joining several countries in the world that are demanding the blockade to end.
Cuba's Foreign Minister Bruno Rodriguez highlighted the role of Russia demanding peace and multilateralism.
I want to reaffirm that relations between Russia and Cuba are excellent. Our ties are based on our history and are of priority for both governments. We based our ties in the friendship between our peoples.
The actions taken by Washington against Venezuela are aimed at ignoring the free will of Latin America and the Caribbean. The U.S. government is doing all it can to confront people of different ideologies, even through a military conflict.
Moving on, teachers and doctors in Honduras are continuing their indefinite national strike against the neoliberal policies of President Juan Orlando Hernandez. On Monday, doctors gathered outside the country's main medical school, while across the country, protesters set up road blockades. Protesters say they will continue taking the streets until the government agrees to stop the privatization of both health and education. It's been more than 4.5 years since the disappearance of 43 students from a rural teachers training college in Ayotzinapa, Mexico. The relatives of the victims are once again mobilizing to demand truth and justice.
Exactly 56 months have passed since the 43 Ayotzinapa students disappeared. Time has passed, but the hope of their parents to see them come back, or at least to know what happened, remains intact. During this protest, the families demanded that the Attorney General appoint a special attorney for the case, as President Andrés Manuel López Obrador had promised at the beginning of his term.
It is not believable or logical to wait so long. We have asked him to speed things up and call the attorney to appear before the commission to explain. That's why we don't think we will have to wait much longer.
Their desperation is palpable as they wait for results from the Truth Commission set up on December 3rd last year by presidential decree. Meeting after meeting, the parents have requested that members of the armed forces who might have been involved in the disappearance of their children be called to declare.
We have come to believe that the disappearance of our children was coordinated. They were present at the killing of 3 students. The Mexican army took pictures and videos. There are documents, but they aren't in the files. They are responsible and we are demanding they be investigated.
Those who have supported the families say that clearing up what happened would send a clear signal that change is possible in this country, where there are 40,000 disappeared people, according to official figures.
As long as this is not solved, things will get worse in this country or remain the same. I was thinking how surreal this all is, a country where 43 students can just disappear from one day to the next.
The relatives of the victims say it is essential that investigations speed up. In mid-June, the members of the Truth Commission will give an initial report on what has been achieved in the first 6 months of work.
We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. In Brazil, around 1,000 human rights activists and favela residents in Rio de Janeiro have taken to the streets to protest against police violence. Under the slogan, "Stop Killing Us," protesters gathered in Ipanema Beach, while a mass demonstration in support of President Jair Bolsonaro was happening simultaneously on a nearby beach. Bolsonaro supports the shoot-to-kill policy in violent neighborhoods like favelas. According to official figures, over 430 police killings took place in the first 3 months of 2019.
My feeling is anger, is sorrow and sadness. I'm here. My son will not come back. Nothing that I or someone else does will bring my son back. But I would like this police violence in the favela to stop so no other mother feels what I'm feeling.
Clashes at a prison in Brazil's Amazonas state have left 15 inmates dead. According to authorities, the clashes broke out on a Sunday during visit hours. Most of the dead were stabbed with toothbrushes or strangled to death. The cause of the clashes are still being investigated. A riot at the same facility in January 2017 killed 56 inmates.
Around 11 a.m. an internal fight broke out in pavilions 5 and 3, leading the warden to activate immediately the prison intervention group. The riot caused the death of 15 inmates. The prison intervention group's action was fundamental so we could maintain control. The incident started around 11 a.m. and by 11:40 it had been contained.
The death toll due to the earthquake which hit Peru on Sunday has risen to 2. A second victim was reported by the authorities on Monday. According to emergency services, a 15-year-old died after due to a strong impact on their head in the province of Patas, while the other victim died during their sleep after a rock fell on their house. An 8-grade earthquake rocked the Peruvian Amazon earlier on Sunday and was felt in Colombia, Ecuador, and Brazil. It's been 11 years since Peru signed the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. However, local organizations say the government has failed to honor these obligations.
Madeline spends most of her day taking care of her 23-year-old daughter, who is living with cerebral palsy. Although the law facilitates her to change or rearrange her work schedule, she was forced to resign as a nurse in the Trujillo hospital in the north of Peru.
They've only given us discounts and told us to find caretakers for our sons and daughters. They've also given us an ultimatum to choose between our jobs or our children.
And did you choose your daughter?
I chose my daughter. I'm a mother first, and if I have to sell things, cook for someone or wash their clothes and leave my profession behind to take care of my daughter, that is what I will do.
The UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities says the relatives in charge of taking care of these people must have reasonable adjustment to their work and job schedules. However, this has never occurred.
Employers used to tell me, it's either you resign or we fire you. That's the kind of influence they have over us. And the state does not take into account the real needs of persons living with disabilities, the way they eat, how their therapy works, how we pay for their diapers, medicines, neurologists, psychiatrists, or pediatricians. We've just been abandoned.
According to the Ombudsman's office, state entities fail to fulfill these obligations under law, causing many families of persons with disabilities not to have access to proper jobs, condemning them to a life of poverty and indignation.
The authorities are totally aware of these issues. What surprises us is that they don't solve it. It's great that the Ombudsman continues fighting alongside mothers who have children with disabilities. Since the convention was signed, we started once again to inform the various authorities about our challenges. We hope to get an acceptable answer.
According to the last census in 2017, around 3 million Peruvians suffer from some kind of disability, 40% of which are serious conditions.
8 former soldiers in Gambia have been charged for plotting to overthrow President Adama Barrow back in 2017. The soldiers are charged with treason for conspiring to detain ministers and military officials, among other charges. They have also been accused of attacking an international force that had been set up to keep order in 2017, led by a former military aide to former President Yahya Jammeh. 7 of the soldiers have been sentenced to 9 years in jail. At least 45 people have died after a boat sank in the Western Democratic Republic of Congo. The boat sank in Lake Main-Dombe on Saturday. According to officials, over 400 people were on board, with reports that about 200 passengers are still missing. Search and rescue operations on the lake could take between 2 and 3 weeks. 11 children were among those who died. Nigerian President Muhammadu Buhari has met the governors of the country's 19 northern states to discuss worsening security conditions. A faction of Boko Haram has become increasingly active in the northeast of the country, attacking civilian and military targets. Hundreds of thousands of people have fled their homes over the last decade because of these attacks. Meanwhile, in the northwest, kidnappings by armed groups have also become rampant. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa has signed into law a new carbon tax to cut down emissions. The tax will be levied from June 1st on greenhouse gases from fuel combustion and industrial processes and emissions. Environmental organizations have recognized the efforts made by the government, but still considers the tax to be insufficient.
The limit that has been set is 120 Rand per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. And there have been a number of studies that have indicated that that is too low. So the amount of money that companies will be paying is insufficient to actually drive them to change their business model.
Malawi's President Peter Mutharika has been elected to a second term in office with a narrow 38.5% of the vote. The result was announced on Monday after an injunction order by the country's high court was lifted. Opposition leader Lazarus Chakwera, who scooped 35.4% of the vote, had sought to delay the announcement due to concerns over voting irregularities. And authorities in Ghana have banned the export of some vegetables, including chili peppers and eggplants, over fears they are contaminated. The ban comes in the wake of a European Union directive to all countries to provide a report on the management of harmful bacteria. The Vegetable Producers and Exporters Association of Ghana has asked to postpone the ban, arguing it will affect the work of about 4,000 farmers. But authorities want to avoid new restrictions being imposed by the EU on Ghana, as the most recent of which were only lifted last year. We'll be back very soon. Stay with us. Welcome back. Fishermen in Bangladesh have protested against the government for opposing a 2-month fishing ban. The government imposed the ban last week in an effort to replenish depleted sea life, but protesters have submitted a memorandum demanding the ban be shortened to 1 month. However, as part of compensation measures, the government has announced it will provide free rice to badly affected fishermen. Police in Indonesia have arrested 6 suspects accused of plotting to assassinate state officials. A police spokesperson said the group were plotting to kill them during riots that broke out in Jakarta last week. Allegedly, the suspects received over $10,000 from an unidentified source as payment for the would-be killings. They have also been charged for being in possession of weapons, which carries a maximum penalty of life in prison.
On March 14, 2019, suspect HK received payment amounting to 150 million rupiah. NTJ received as much as 25 million rupiah from someone who we have identified. DJ was ordered to kill 2 national figures. I cannot say their names in public.
The Austrian parliament has removed Chancellor Sebastian Kurz from office during a special parliamentary session. In a no-confidence vote, Kurz was voted out of office over a corruption scandal that had already brought down his coalition with the far right. The scandal erupted after he was caught on the camera offering public contracts in return for campaign help. Kurz is now the first chancellor in the country's post-war history to be removed from office. Centrist parties across the European Union have suffered heavily in the bloc's parliamentary elections, with the far right and Green parties making major gains. The far right are set to take 74 seats, up from 37, while the Green Alliance is set to increase its number of seats from 50 to 75. The right-wing European People's Party is set to take the highest number of seats, but still recorded significant losses, dropping from 221 to 165. Voter turnout increased to over 50% across the bloc. While the far right and the Greens were the biggest winners in the European elections, some of the results were uneven, for example, in Greece. Our correspondent Ibai Arbide has the latest from Athens.
A day after the European elections, one conclusion is clear. The right has won. The right and the far right have grown stronger and the left has been weakened, while the Greens have emerged as a possibly decisive force, which could decide the majority in some votes in the European Parliament. Here in Greece, there is a paradox. This is one of the countries where the far right is the strongest. The neo-Nazi party Golden Dawn is the third force in the Greek Parliament. But yesterday, while the far right was growing in most of Europe, here it lost support. From 3 members of the European Parliament, it went down to 2. However, this is an exception. Elsewhere in Europe, we see significant results for the League of Italian Prime Minister Salvini, the new party of Marine Le Pen in France, the Brexit party of Nigel Farage in Britain, Wilders in the Netherlands, the ultra-conservatives in Poland. In Hungary, the Fidesz party of Prime Minister Viktor Orban won 56%, and the neo-Nazi Jobbik came second. So it's clear that across Europe, the far-right forces have made gains, and the moderate right, groups in the European Popular Party, held on to the largest number of seats. They were followed by the socialists, who lost ground in most of the continent, although in Spain they maintained the momentum they got in April's general elections. The ALDE coalition of liberals is still the third force in the European Parliament, but what is most worrying is that the sum of the different parties of the far right, not yet attached to any parliamentary group, is very big, and that could mean they get even more weight.
We thank our correspondent for that report. The former Catalan president, Carles Puigdemont, who is currently in exile, scored a victory in the European elections in Catalonia. Puigdemont, along with Toni Comín, won a seat in the European Parliament. Let's find out more.
The Junts per Catalonia party celebrated receiving the highest number of votes in Catalonia among Organization for Europe, with almost 1 million votes, and outside Catalonia they won nearly 40,000 more. Puigdemont and Comín thus secured their ticket to the European Parliament. The party also ended up 6 points ahead of the second organization, the Socialist Party of Catalonia. Charles Puigdemont sent a message to Foreign Affairs Minister Josep Borrell.
The independence movement has won with a great advantage over the representative of the Spanish government. The representative of the Spanish diplomacy must now listen to our voice, as we are now in the European Parliament.
A big question remaining is what will happen with the former Catalonian president. Electoral law establishes that he must pick up his documents for the European Parliament in Madrid. But if Puigdemont sets foot on Spanish soil, he'll be arrested. But Puigdemont's legal team says this could not happen, as they are convinced that by adhering to European law, Puigdemont may occupy his seat without being detained.
Up until now, we have won everything, and we have won based on European Union law. Which is what makes them uncomfortable. In particular, two things: President Puigdemont and EU law.
Oriol Junqueras from the Esquerra Republicana party will also have a seat in the European Parliament. It remains to be seen if European institutions will treat him in the same way Spanish institutions have, institutions which suspended him as a congressman during the campaign trail.
This is a fantastic opportunity for all of us, for our country, for society, but also for all European Democrats, because we are placing a mirror to their faces. We're going to face them with European institutions, with the Parliament, with the European Commission, to show the profound injustice of having innocent people imprisoned.
Sunday's elections have opened up a brand new political and legal scenario in Europe. The treatment given by EU institutions to its new members, who are both political prisoners and exiles, will be under a looking glass.
And with that story, we've come to the end of this news brief. These and other stories, as always, find them on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also join us on social media. We are on Facebook, on Twitter, and on Instagram. For Telesur English, I am Estefania Bravo. Thank you for watching.